Welcome back to Brighter Morning with Bhoe. My name is Bhoe Tewari. I'm so happy that you have stayed with us. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. David Lee, the member for Pointe-à-Pierre, member of the Opposition United National Congress. We move on now to two young guests from the Children's Authority. Are they on yet? No. Okay, so we are trying to make contact with them. On the other side of the show, on the other earlier half of the show, I was talking about the Africa CARICOM summit and commending the leaders of the region on what they had been able to do, and really focusing on the issue that unless they identified what were the critical issues in the world that they had to address, it would make no sense to have these meetings perpetually, because there were big geopolitical issues, there were big issues having to do with the power sharing or the power relationship between developed, industrialized and developing countries. And there were critical issues having to do with trade, investment, flow of finance, migration of people, very, very important issues that had to be addressed. And then there was the challenging issue of the imbalance that came out of the imperial encounter. But another time for these issues. I just want to mention that Morocco is a country in Africa, North Africa. People seem to forget also that Egypt is a country, in Africa. And Morocco is having elections, I think today, if I'm not mistaken. And this is under a new constitution. I've been to Morocco. It's a liberal Islamic country. It's very rich in culture. It has a long history and tradition of engagement of the West. You would remember the famous film Casablanca was made there, and that made that city in Morocco famous. So there are elections today under the new constitution. So we will see how that turns out. And I just want to mention the Afghanistan situation, because that continues to be important and relevant, which is that the Taliban have announced part of their new government now. The United States does not seem to be happy with the people that they named, because all of them have terrorist origins. And there are other members to announce, so we don't know what is the final shape that government will take. But while the Taliban is establishing itself in governmental office, the people in the country are under pressure. A lot of them who work for the state, for the governmental system, have not been paid. They don't have any money. They are in difficulty. And there's a lot of stress on the population. And the international community, including the World Bank, have really made it very difficult for any money to flow into Afghanistan under the Taliban, unless the issue of how they will govern turns out to be palatable or acceptable to what we generally regard as the West. So we have a complex situation emerging there in Afghanistan. They are going to be, we've mentioned some of the geopolitical issues, but this is another major issue that is coming up now. The starvation of finance and funds to the government and institutions in Afghanistan. Secondly, the type of government that the Taliban will establish and how that will be regarded outside. And finally, the pressure on the population based on a combination of lack of funds on the part of the government, although they have power, and secondly, the lack of release of funds from institutions like the World Bank to the country. So I thank you for listening. We always try to keep you in tune with what's happening in the news, both locally and internationally. I do not report the news. What I do is I comment on newsworthy things which I think are relevant to you as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, that could be very local. I always deal with the issues that are local. It could be regional, or it could be international. And I want to say to you that everything in the world that of consequence matters to you, because you need to understand what these things imply for you. For instance, I don't know if you know that the opposition leaders in Venezuela are talking with the current president, and they are narrowing their differences, so the chances are we may get some internal positive movement in Venezuela that could lead to some kind of peaceful transition of government and maybe elections that are monitored in some way. So we will wait. We will wait and see. But that, what happens in Venezuela is very important to us. You can swim across there, swim across from there to here. People take boats all the time to come. It is 7 miles away. And we have a good 60,000 Venezuelans in Trinidad and Tobago, although the official figures are about 16,500. Okay, so we will keep you informed of what is happening, and you need to know what is happening. So we want to go on now to our guests this morning. They are from the Children's Authority, and their names are Anjuli, Tewari, Fague, I think, and then Renee, Neptune, and Anjuli Tewari Fague is the team lead for the foster care unit, and Renee Neptune is the acting manager for the adoption unit, and we will talk to them now if we can get them online. Are you on? Good morning, ladies.
Morning.
How are you? Lift their volume so we can hear them well.
Hi, we're fine. Thanks so much for having us on this morning.
No, we're very glad to have you. What about you, Ms. Neptune? How are you doing? I'm not hearing you. Tap your unmute. Unmute your...
Am I better now? Are you hearing me better now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I say thank you for having us this morning.
Yes, well, tell me something. Why should we be talking to the Children's Authority this morning? What is important about that?
Well,
I want you to say. Yeah.
Sure. September is Foster Care and Adoption Awareness Month.
Right.
So we're really happy to have this opportunity to spread the word about foster care and adoption, to raise awareness and let the nation know what it's about, because many people still don't know that we have an active foster care and adoption system in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, very good. All right, so these are two of the services that the Children's Authority manage, and you are the people in charge of that. So let's take them one by one. Let's take foster care first. Explain to me what is happening there in the sense of how many children are involved, how do you manage them, how do you go about your business?
Sure. So I'm really glad Renee is on with me this morning because, as you said, foster care should be treated separately from adoption. A lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago, they mix the two terms up. So we really want to clarify the difference and let people know what it's about and how they can be different. So foster care is a temporary care option in Trinidad and Tobago. So when we have to remove children based on a variety of reasons, whether it be abuse, neglect, they've been abandoned, whether they are at risk in any form or fashion, sometimes we're not able to find family members or fit persons to place them with. And in those instances, temporary, safe, loving homes are necessary. And that's where foster care kicks in. We need those families to step forward, and we can do our assessments to ensure that they're safe, so we can place children in those temporary environments while we continue to do investigations to look to see if we can reintegrate them with their families or fit persons. In Trinidad, yeah?
No,
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish.
Sure. No problem. Sure problem. In Trinidad and Tobago, actually, it's been around for quite some time. So in 1995, a small pilot project was established by the National Family Services. So it was very informal. They tried it out, and then when the Children's Authority became proclaimed, established in 2015, we took over the management of foster care. So we began our processes, followed closely by legislation, and since then we've managed to assess and approve 56 foster care providers across Trinidad and Tobago, and we have approximately 78 children in foster care at present, but over the past 6 years, we've placed over 170 children in foster care.
All right. Now, I want to clarify some of the issues that you mentioned. You were very clear and very good, but I want to dissect them a little bit.
Sure.
First of all, how do you determine that a child is at risk in the home in which they are? All right, so that's the first issue. The second issue is, how do you go about trying to find foster care for them? In other words, how do you identify the families? Thirdly, how do you follow up to make sure that they have not moved from the frying pan into the fire, but they have better care and loving guidance? And fourthly, I want you to clarify that they do not go into a state institution, they go with a family.
Right. So those are 4 big questions. So I'm going to tackle them one by one. So the first question is, how do we determine that a child is at risk and needs to be placed into care? So as you're aware, the Children's Authority covers quite a wide span of mandated functions. We're closely guided by legislation. So when we have a 24/7 registry unit, we receive calls if there's any children at risk, or if it is that somebody is concerned about a child. When we get those calls, our teams are able to go out, whether to substantiate, to determine if the call is valid, if that child is in immediate danger. When our teams go out, we're able to look at our legislation, determine if this child is safe, if there are any family members available who are willing to take that child at that point in time. And only when we've determined at that point in time there's no one who we can find that's safe to place this child, only then we will remove that child. So we really have these misconceptions that Children's Authority breaks up families and removes children unnecessarily. But I do want to sort of emphasize that we would not remove a child unless at that point in time nobody really had stepped forward, or we can determine a safe place for that child.
But
so
let me clarify that, because that is an important issue. So the disposition of the Children's Authority is in fact to keep children with family members. First of all, the original home, if they could solve that problem. And
yes.
Secondly, within the family, if you can do it, rather than to move them out of the
yes.
family setting. Is that correct?
So I always like to use a term. We always look to place children with their families where appropriate, possible, and in the best interest of that child. Okay. So when we get a call and we have to determine whether they're safe or not, we have to look as to whether it's safe to leave them where they are, if it's safe to put them with a family member. So there's a lot of things we have to do in the background. And sometimes if we get a call 2 o'clock in the morning, we do have to make split decisions if no family members have come forward. But trust me, our team continues to work diligently in the background, trying to find those family members because we do not want to break up families unnecessarily.
All right. Okay. You remember the other questions?
Yes. So the second question, I believe you asked, how do we find our foster parents? Or how do we find these safe families? So we do appeal to the public as we're doing now. We ask persons to call us to find out what foster care is, find out what it is for you, and we put them through a thorough assessment process. Because like you said, we want to make sure they're not going from the frying pan into the fryer. So really and truly, we follow the legislation quite strictly. We do many variety of assessments, including home assessments, in-depth interviews, psychological assessments, background checks, basic training, reference checks. So we have a list of assessments in order to determine as best as possible that these applicants are safe. We put them forward before our board, and once they're approved, they join a register of approved foster care providers. So when we get a call, we're able to look at our list of approved providers to determine what is the best match for a child. For example, if it is that we get a 2-year-old abandoned at the side of the road, we're able to look at our list to see which foster care provider wanted a younger child, if they wanted a boy, a girl, sibling pairs. So when you become a foster care provider, you can let us know your preference as to the type of child that was placed in your care.
Okay. Well, you answered the third question, which was the follow-up. And
Yes.
the final question is that you do not take this child from the family and put them into a government school, right?
So we place them. Initially, what we do is we do try to place children in family environments.
Right.
So our first try is we try our foster care register. But what I do have to point out is, in spite of our many efforts to encourage persons to step forward for foster care, not many people step forward. Not many people are willing to do that sort of temporary care arrangements. A lot of persons want that permanent care arrangement like adoption, which we'll speak about shortly. And because of that, we have, even though I'm really proud of our 56 foster care providers, that is quite a small number considering the number of requests for placements that we do get. So when the placement teams contact foster care and there are no placement options available, especially for those difficult to place children, such as teenagers and children with disabilities, we do tend to sometimes have to rely on our children's homes, or as we call them, community residences, because at the end of the day, we do need to find a safe space for those children. So ultimately, if it is that we can't find family members or fit persons, or we can't find foster parents, we do have to rely on what Trinidad has relied on historically, which is our children's homes.
We won't talk about the children's homes today, but one final question before I go to adoption. Why do you say a lot of people would rather adoption than foster care, but why do people choose foster care when they do? What is it that prompts them to do?
I think I have to say, with our foster parents, our list of approved foster care providers, they really are a special bunch, because when you sign up for foster care, in a sense, you are very aware that it is a temporary arrangement. It can be as short as one night to a couple of weeks or a couple of months or a couple of years even, depending on the circumstances of the child. But our foster parents, I believe they chose foster care because they know that they can make a difference in a child's life, even if it's for a short period. So in a sense, they're not thinking about, oh, I'll get too attached, it'll be too hard to say goodbye, but rather they're focusing on how can I make a difference for a child, even if it means for one night they can get a bed to sleep in, warm food in their tummy, and I can make them feel loved. So I really feel as though it's a different mindset with foster care. You're not caring for a child thinking I'm going to have them forever. You are thinking, for now, how can I help this child? How can I make this child feel safe when they're scared and alone? How can I help them feel that they're part of a family whilst we're trying to see if we can get them back to their families?
Okay, so you would say most of the people who venture into foster care do it out of the goodness of their hearts or care
Definitely.
for children and so on, and therefore they are a special breed of caring people. right?
I definitely think so. I think our foster parents that we do have and persons who volunteer for this, they're really big-hearted persons, people who are willing to open their hearts and homes to children. And I do want to appeal to our public because that's something that we've done as a culture, for centuries. We open up our homes to children, caring for them, even children that we don't know. So now foster care is allowing us to do that in a more formalized way, and we can ensure, the authority can ensure that these homes are safe or as safe as possible.
I'm moving on to you now on the adoption, and tell me what you do and how it's different.
Okay, so adoption and foster care are two separate entities. Whilst foster care is temporary, adoption is permanent. So we are heavily guided by the Adoption of Children Act, and we also inform persons that Children's Authority is the only body responsible for adoptions. Once an adoption is a legal transfer of parental rights and responsibilities from a child's birth parents to that child's now what we call adopters, the persons who are adopting the child. Once that is completed and it's granted by the court, that child is now a permanent member of that family. And adoption brings about a sense of belonging and permanency. So that child who is adopted, they are able to inherit from that family, and they're entitled to all the rights as a normal birth child would be.
Yes, okay. And do you have many families wanting to adopt?
Yes, we have a lot of families who want to adopt. Right now, our list is quite long, and we at present do not have a pool of children readily available for adoption. So at this time, we usually urge birth parents who may be expecting, come to us, inform the adoption unit or contact the authority. This is a way of how we get children to place with persons who may not be in a financial position. They may not have the family support to care for that child. We ask them to contact us rather than leaving a child abandoned. We can find a safe and loving home for that child. It doesn't have to be adoption. It can also be foster care, but come to us. And that is one of the ways in which, we place children, we ensure that they have a safe and loving home and environment.
So you have fewer children who are available for adoption and a larger number of people who are willing to adopt.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
How do you just kind of explained how you get some of your children, that is to say they might be abandoned children, or there might a mother in difficulty feeling that she might not be able to care for the baby, etc. But you are talking here about babies, though. What about other children? Are there different ages of children who generally present themselves or are a case for adoption?
Yes, so we do have, there may be older children for adoption, but we realize that a lot of people want to adopt babies. They want to nurture a child, they want a younger child, ideally. So we do also encourage persons who are interested in adopting to expand your age range. There are older children who also need love, they need a care, they need a loving and safe home. And at this time, we also say that yes, there are a lot of children in the community residences, or we know the children's homes. Persons may ask us, but there are a lot of children there, why can't we adopt them? But those children are there. A lot of them are probably placed by the court. And for a child to be able to be adopted, that child has to be what we call freed for adoption. So these children in the community residences are not readily available for adoption. They're not freed for adoption. And when we say freed, we have to find their parents, we have to find guardians, we have to try to get consent from their parents before we can place them for adoption. Part of the adoption process, a big part of it, is obtaining consent from their family members, their birth parents, before we can place them.
Is that
and that is the reason why we may not have a pool.
Is that a difficult or problematic process of getting permission?
It is. Sometimes there's like a stigma attached to adoption where parents may not feel comfortable stating, okay, I place my child for adoption or I relinquish my parental consent. So at times we may find it hard, there are children who may be in long-term foster care, who may be in the community residences for a long time, or persons who may leave children abandoned and we're unable to find them, we're unable to locate them. And so it's come to the decision of the court, okay, can we dispense with the parents' consent? So we do find that it is a problem sometimes in getting children placed for adoption because we first have to get those parents' consent.
Yeah. You mentioned just now about the court. The court basically determining that a child should be put up for adoption. Tell me about that process. How does that happen?
So the adoption is heavily guided by the Adoption of Children Act 2000. The court is the one who makes the final adoption order. So while Children's Authority may make the recommendation to the court is the one who grants the order. In the process of trying to find a child's parents, if we are unable to locate them, there are grounds according to Section 24 of the Adoption Act in which the court can dispense with a parent's consent, but it is to the discretion of the court, not Children's Authority.
Okay, so it's a court order, essentially, and determined after all the facts, including the recommendation,
yes,
are sent by the Children's Authority, and ultimately a judge will determine. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. In the issue of adoption, though, how do you ensure that there is a good fit between the child? I mean, it probably is easy if a child is a baby or 1 year old or even 2 years old, but it becomes more difficult if that child is 7 or 8 or 9 or even older, and a child is determined under our law as anyone under 18, right? So in that situation, tell me about some of the complexities of matching the child and the child's need to the needs of the parents who are willing to adopt.
Right. So that is a part of our process, as you stated, matching. We have a list of suitable persons. These persons would have gone through a thorough screening process where there's background checks, psychological assessments, clinical interviews, a home visit. Within the application form for adoption, persons get to select what we call a child profile. So they can state the age of a child that they would like to have placed with them, if they're willing to adopt a sibling group, if they want, let's say, a male or female child, all those things. And those things are noted within our list of suitable persons. When they are approved and let's say they're matched with a child, matching is done at the committee level. So once they are matched with a child, what we have as part of our adoption process is interaction sessions. These sessions can go on for 10 weeks. It is where the children get to bond, interact every week with the prospective adoptive parents. So this is monitored as well. They get to meet, they get to state their likes, dislikes, and they just get to develop a sort of relationship with each other. And especially for an older child, we do have conversations with that child. The views of the child are taken into consideration. We ask them, what do you expect out of a family? Would you like to live with a family? What are your expectations out of this? Views of the child are not left out. They are included every step of the way.
All right. Okay. You said that there are a lot of families really waiting for the opportunity. Adoption. Do you have any interface with the state institutions or the orphanages, etc.? And do you play any role in that? And what is the general disposition, or what are the motivating factors in parents wanting to adopt?
So yes, a lot of children, whilst they're waiting to be adopted, the children that may be candidates for adoption, some of them may be in the community residences, and we work along with the community residences as they care for these children, whilst we build a relationship with the children as well as the prospective adoptive parents. That those are the persons, those are what we call the persons who are wishing to adopt prospective adoptive parents. They have high expectations of us. We follow through with them through every step of the way. We continue to keep them involved. We provide support for them should they, feel like they need any type of counseling to help them adjust to this placement. Should they need any parenting support, all these things are provided along with their needs. So we find out, okay, are you comfortable with this? What areas do you feel you may be lacking in? Do you think you need this support or that support? And we work along with them, as well as the community residences. We continue to work with them hand in hand, and they offer great support to us.
Yeah. Okay. And how do you feel? I'm asking both of you now about the jobs that you do. Is it fulfilling, or is it fulfilling as well as very stressful and traumatic?
That's a big question. I think when you work in child protection, it comes without even asking. It is going to be tough. It definitely is going to be tough. That's what you signed up for. You're not working with happy endings always. You're not seeing pretty things always. But I feel from my perspective, I've been with the Children's Authority from the very beginning. I've been here since 2012. So I've seen it grow. I've seen strides we've made. And we're getting better day by day. Obviously, we will make missteps here and there. But I feel as though the persons who are with the authority were very passionate about what we do. I know for certain I'm really passionate about foster care. I see a lot of happy endings. I'm really fortunate in my role. We see a lot of smiling children, a lot of children being reunited with their families, children prospering in foster care. So I can definitely say, whilst yes, it is stressful, that's what child protection is, and it is tough sometimes, but I do feel fulfilled and rewarded by what I do.
Okay, what about you, Renee, Ms. Neptune?
So to echo the sentiments of Anjuli, yes, it can be stressful at times, but we always say that adoption is like our happy unit, because adoption is not about finding a child for a family. It is about finding a family for a child. So at the end of the day, when we see strides that child has made from where they have come to being in a loving, caring family environment and flourishing in a nurturing environment, it is fulfilling. And we have families who have gone through the process and they still keep in contact with us. They still send us pictures. They still send us updates of the children, and it's a very fulfilling thing to see. It's a very selfless act.
Do you write up these cases? You write up these cases, the follow-ups, to see how the children have progressed?
Yeah, so once the cases, so a part of the adoption process as well, it's a monitoring. There's a 6-month probationary period monitoring. But once the case has been closed, once the adoption order has been granted, we do sometimes call to check in with the parents. We advise them, should you all need further assistance, feel free to contact us. Not because the adoption has been granted, it means that you can no longer reach out to us. We continue to liaise with them. They may ask us for advice. If they need referrals to anywhere, those are provided. They continue to interact with us as the child grows older and progresses.
Would you say most of your adoption cases are success stories and your foster care cases? Would you say generally they are? There must be little problems here and there, but let's leave that for a minute. Would you say most are successful?
I would say definitely in foster care, we see a lot of successes. We see a lot of different types of cases. Each case is individual, and we see a lot of successes. I think we wouldn't be doing what we do unless we saw the successes. But I would be lying if I didn't say that there were tough times and hiccups here or there.
Yeah,
but
problems.
Our team, we hold the hands of the foster parents throughout the process. We never, once you get a foster child in your care, you are matched with a caseworker. So we're there along for the ups and the downs. We're there through the good times and the bad times, So I would say the successes definitely make it worthwhile.
What about adoption? Do you end up with happy
Yes,
children,
we definitely,
happy families? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, along the way, there may be one or two challenges,
Of
but
course.
again, the adoption team is always there to provide support. The authority is always there to provide support, and we do see a lot of successes in these stories at the end. And it's what makes it so fulfilling to know that you were able to find a loving and caring family for this child and just see them blossom and grow. It's a success.
Well,
It is.
it has been an inspiration to talk to you so far, but I want to take you a little bit into the dark side now, okay? Because we're dealing with reality. Do you, in your work, see instances of abused children or violated children or what can I say? Basically brutalized children. Do you see that at all? And if so, how much is it? How prevalent is it?
So I think at the authority, unfortunately, that's something that we do see quite often. I mean, we
Yes.
have many variety of teams. We have our investigations teams. We have our emergency response teams. So sometimes, unfortunately, those teams really do see some, terrible things that a child should never experience. Sometimes some of us who've been in the field for such a long time, you still get shocked at some of the things that children have to endure and experience. So yes, at the authority, we do see those dark sides, I guess, dark sides of human nature, to know that people can do this to children. But
Yeah.
as staff at the authority, it's our role. That's what we signed up for. It's our role to see as best as possible how we can protect these children, how we can put through the system so that we can make sure it doesn't happen to them anymore. So we try within our power and authority to see how best we can support these children, monitor these children, support the families of these children. So even in foster care, when we do our checks, when we've placed a child with an approved foster care provider, we still continue monitoring them throughout the way, because we have to report back to the court that this child continues to be safe.
All right. So, in your appreciation and understanding, what what do you think are the prompting conditions that are dominant that lead to a situation of abuse in a home?
I think that's a big question. I think maybe better spend one day with one of our psychologists, but there's a variety of reasons that can lead to abuse. It could be that the perpetrator has been abused themselves, before. It could be a variety of reasons, and there's a variety of types of abuse, as you know. There's physical, emotional, sexual abuse, there's neglect, there's abandonment. So there's quite a variety of reasons as well as why a child would come into care. Not always because of maybe abuse or trauma, but sometimes it may very well be that there's no family members, no fit persons coming forward who want this child, who are able to care for this child. So every child coming into care presents with a different story. So it's not like, you can just open this code book and there's an easy fix for every single
No,
child,
I
or an
know it
easy,
isn't. It's a very
yeah.
complex problem. I agree.
Yeah.
I want to tell you a little story. My mother and father had 5 children. There were 5 of us, 3 boys and 2. And they adopted a 6th child. And that 6th child came from an orphanage. And she has been my sister ever since. And my mother unofficially gave foster care to about 17 children who passed through her hands.
Wow.
Some of them continue to be in touch with me. Some of them lived with us for different stages of their life. Maybe some of them might be 6 months, some might be a year, some might be 2 years, until they were able to get on their feet. And she ensured that every child whom she provided foster care for got a good education, because that was important to her,
Yeah.
even if she had to teach them herself.
Yeah.
And in fact, a young writer from Trinidad and Tobago has fictionalized her in one of her books because one of her brothers was one of the children who got the foster care when they
Okay.
were under severe economic circumstances. So my interest in this is not just academic or journalistic. It is real
Yeah.
because I know what can happen when you touch the life of a child. And I want to let you know also that my wife, much more than me, in fact, adopted children in our home, at least two of them, at different times because I was so busy, but she took the care and I would be there in the evenings and so on. And saw them through high school, made sure they passed their CXCs and so on. And that's why I asked you the question of abuse, because I cannot understand the kind of human being who would violate or abuse a little child, you know. I find it very hard to appreciate and understand and enter that psychological realm.
Yeah.
So it's a problem, it's a real problem for me, and it's a prevalent problem in Trinidad and Tobago, you know. You see it in the language, you see it in the way people behave. I mean, just too
But
terrible.
I'm glad you shared the story about your mother because, as I said earlier, this is something that we've done culturally for centuries. It's something that we do as a people. So that's why we really do want to encourage persons to come forward and think about doing it formally. Contact the authority. You may not be in a position where, fortunately, like your mother, she knew many children who could, have access to that care. And if you do it through the authority, we do offer that support. We offer the monitoring, we offer counseling, we even offer financial support towards the needs of the child. But we're able to continue monitoring, ensuring that child is safe, and doing it in a more formalized way. We would want that one day foster care becomes a normalized thing in Trinidad, as opposed to relying so heavily on the institutions, because whilst the institutions have been trying to do as best as possible under the circumstances, we really do want to move more towards family environments, because children prosper more in a family environment.
Yes, of course.
And to add to that, even the informal arrangements of adoption, we may see that parents left children with their friends or grandparents, aunts, uncles. A lot of them do want to formalize these arrangements. The child can benefit from their inheritance, educationally, physically, socially. So we do urge and we appeal to those birth parents who may be considering adoption or finalizing that arrangement between the family members, friends, or whoever. Come to us and we can guide you on the correct processes to have that completed.
Yes, no. It's I want to commend you on the work that you do. I'm glad you took this opportunity in the month of September to highlight what you do. I hope those who are listening and watching see how valuable the work that you do is and will recognize the work of the Children's Authority. I'm always concerned about the quality of care that takes place in the state institutions and the private homes in which children are, because I know that there are external problems, not just the internal problems, but there are external problems as well. And I'm always very, very concerned about things like that. But I want to say how good I feel to know that there's a kind of watchful eye over this, and that there are more parents willing, there are more people, more adults willing to do good than there are children available to be cared for. But I know that there are a lot of uncared children who will just not come to the attention of the authority. How do you deal with that? What about all these? What about all of these? I don't know what is the correct word to use, but what about all of these children who do not come to the attention of the authorities, but in some ways, need an intervention or need a care? How do you respond to that?
I think, in a sense, what we do at the authority, we're trying to raise awareness about child protection in general. And really and truly, these are our nation's children. We are all responsible for our children. These are our
Well, that's
children.
how I feel, and that's how you
Yeah.
feel, but not
So we
everybody
really
feels
are
that
trying
way.
to we're trying to empower and educate the public about abuse, about the signs of abuse, what to look out for, and we encourage persons to contact the authority when they are concerned that a child is being neglected or abused. They can contact our 24/7 hotline, which is 996 or 800 2014, or they can even contact us at info@ttchildren.org. At the end of the day, if it is that you see something, you must say something. That's the only way it can come to our attention. There's so many calls that come in nonstop, and we need to be there to sort of validate and substantiate whether these calls are real, if a child is actually in danger, and if they need to get assistance. Even if the authority doesn't step in, we can possibly make referrals to other agencies who are active in providing care and support for children and their families.
And we have an immigration challenge here now, especially with with Venezuelans because of the problem next door. Do you see any children who come from refugees or asylum seekers or immigrants who are hard pressed? Do you see those at all? Do those come to your attention?
Yep, once a child is in Trinidad and Tobago, it will come to our attention, and we have engaged with the Venezuelan community on different instances. We are looking at different care options for them. At this point in time, we are also working with UNICEF to see how we can set up a sort of project with regards to providing foster care for those non-migrant children. So they do come to our attention. It is something, once a child is in need of care and protection, the authority has to step in. We are part of that process, and we work alongside our partner agencies to see how we can assist.
So to you, a child is a child. It does not matter what the legal status is. Is that correct?
Yes, I think once a child is within our borders, we have a responsibility.
Our law allows for that.
So we have a thriving legal unit in the authority, and once a child is in need, we are seeing to those needs within our borders.
And the fact that the child is not legally a citizen or the child of a citizen does not really matter.
I think if you think about it, I think even if you work in childcare, if you hear a story about a child in need, whether they're in India, Africa, China, America, Canada, and you don't feel a sense of wanting to help, then that's a wrong field for you. So I think once you're in child protection or an agency that assists, a child is a child, regardless of if they have their papers, we have to help. We have an obligation, an ethical obligation too.
Well, ethical, I agree, and you might have the disposition. I was just trying to clarify whether the law allows you to do that. So
yes, the law does allow us to
I'm
assist.
glad to hear that it is, so it means that we have a good piece of legislation. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Anjuli and Renee, Neptune. You are Tewari Fague, right? Thank you so much for being here today and talking about adoption, talking about foster care, and talking about the Children's Authority. It was a delightful conversation. I learned a lot. You clarified a lot. I hope I hope listeners and viewers are more enlightened now. And I hope all of us who claim to be adults, will have the attitude that children are for our care, or protection, and for guidance, not for our exploitation and abuse. If we could simply take that kind of disposition as an adult, I think you will do the world and the country a favor. So thank you very, very much for being here. We talk to you on another occasion.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Thank you.
All right then. Bye. Well, you heard that. I mean, if you have children, pay attention to them and love them and care for them as best you can. I know sometimes it's a struggle. If you have grandchildren, I know they are very special to you, being a grandfather myself. So I want to say to you, the children are very, very precious. They're God's gift to us, and we should do what we can to care for them and look after them and to make sure they find their way in the world in a constructive and purposeful trajectory. Thank you very much for listening and watching. This is Brighter Morning with Bhoe. My name is Bhoe Tewari, and you are looking on U97.5 Listening Radio and MCTV Multicultural TV. Thank you very much.